Imagine turning on your TV one morning and seeing a cartoon from your childhood suddenly come to life in the real world. A simple joke, drawn years ago, now shaping history before your very eyes. How could a cartoon possibly predict the rise of a billionaire businessman to the most powerful office on Earth? And what does it mean for us when fiction starts to blur with reality? The Simpsons has always been more than just a comedy show. For decades, it's entertained families around the globe with its sharp humor, satirical take on society, and exaggerated yet strangely relatable characters. But every now and then, something extraordinary happens. An episode or a joke turns into a chilling prediction of the future. Among all the eerie forecasts The Simpsons has been credited with, none is as jaw-dropping and controversial as their prediction that Donald Trump would one day become the President of the United States. What started as a satirical gag became a political reality, shocking millions and raising questions about how a cartoon show could seemingly foresee history itself. When we think about The Simpsons, most people immediately recall the bright yellow characters, the quirky family dynamics, and the endless parade of hilarious side characters that fill the town of Springfield. But beneath the comedy, beneath the slapstick humor and outrageous plots, The Simpsons has always been a mirror of society. From politics to pop culture, from science to technology, this show has been holding up a satirical lens to the world for over 3 decades. What makes this lens so fascinating is that, time and time again, it seems to reflect not just the present, but the future. It's as if The Simpsons writers have somehow tapped into a crystal ball, predicting events that seemed impossible or ridiculous at the time but later unfolded in shocking reality. And that's what gives their legacy of predictions such an aura of mystery, fascination, and sometimes even fear. Think about this for a moment. A cartoon, designed to make us laugh, has managed to capture some of the most defining events of our generation before they happened. When the writers first put pen to paper, they weren't claiming to be prophets. They were simply pushing boundaries, exaggerating the flaws of human behavior, and satirizing society in a way that seemed absurd enough to be funny. But the absurd, over time, kept becoming reality. That's where the story of The Simpsons' legacy of predictions really begins. Take technology, for example. Years before we held smartphones in our hands, The Simpsons aired episodes showing characters video calling one another, something that seemed futuristic at the time but is now an everyday reality. They showcased wristwatch phones long before smartwatches became part of our lives. They even depicted faulty autocorrect, a frustratingly accurate portrayal of how technology sometimes gets the simplest words wrong. These weren't just throwaway gags. They were glimpses into possibilities, framed as jokes, that later slipped seamlessly into our world. It wasn't just technology. They touched politics, too. The show often ridiculed political figures, but what makes it eerie is how closely their satire sometimes aligned with real-life outcomes. In one episode, Siegfried and Roy-style magicians were mauled by their own tiger, a tragic fate that eerily mirrored an actual event years later. In another, they showcased voting machines malfunctioning, switching votes from one candidate to another, which uncannily resembled real controversies that emerged in U.S. elections. Over time, these predictions began piling up. They showed Disney buying 20th Century Fox years before the deal actually happened. They showed the United States winning an Olympic gold medal in curling against Sweden, a surprising outcome that later came true. They even touched on environmental issues, social trends, and inventions that didn't exist yet, all with a playful, satirical tone that made them seem like impossible jokes at the time. But as these events unfolded, fans began looking back and connecting the dots, and suddenly, The Simpsons wasn't just a comedy. It was a phenomenon that seemed to defy coincidence. The legacy of predictions became one of the most talked-about aspects of the show. Viewers around the world started combing through old episodes, searching for hidden forecasts of the future. Social media fueled this frenzy, with clips and screenshots going viral every time something in the real world echoed a moment from Springfield. It became part of pop culture lore. Any major event that happened, people asked the same question. Did The Simpsons already predict this? This legacy has elevated the show beyond entertainment. It has made The Simpsons a cultural touchstone, a kind of animated oracle that people reference whenever reality feels stranger than fiction. Even skeptics who argue that the predictions are simply coincidences or the result of clever satire can deny the sheer number of times the show has seemed to get it right. And it's this reputation, this legacy of uncanny foresight, that sets the stage for one of the most mind-bending, talked-about predictions of them all. The day The Simpsons predicted that Donald Trump would become the President of the United States. In the year 2000, The Simpsons aired an episode titled Bart to the Future. On the surface, it was another light-hearted story where Bart Simpson got a glimpse of his future as an adult, a grown-up who still hadn't managed to get his life together. But hidden within the colorful animation and comedic beats was a single line that would echo louder than anyone could have imagined. Lisa Simpson, now the President of the United States in this vision of the future, casually mentions that her administration had inherited quite a budget crunch from President Trump. At the time, it was meant as a throwaway gag, a piece of satire poking fun at Donald Trump as larger-than-life persona and his reputation in the 1990s as a flashy businessman. No one watching that episode seriously believed it was a roadmap for the future, and yet, looking back now, it feels less like satire and more like prophecy. To understand why this single line became so iconic, we need to rewind to the cultural climate of the year 2000. Donald Trump wasn't a politician then, he was a brand. He was the symbol of opulence, of skyscrapers with his name in gold, of the lavish lifestyle plastered across magazines and tabloids. He was known for casinos, beauty pageants, real estate deals, and his celebrity status. Trump represented wealth, ambition, and extravagance. But the thought of him running the country, of him actually stepping into the Oval Office, was almost absurd to the average person. That absurdity was exactly why the writers chose him. It wasn't a prediction. It was satire at its sharpest. The idea of President Trump was so far-fetched at the time that it worked perfectly as a joke, a kind of exaggerated what if that underscored the ridiculousness of politics as imagined through the eyes of The Simpsons. But that's the beauty and the mystery of satire. What is laughed off in the moment can suddenly transform into reality when history takes unexpected turns. The moment Lisa mentions inheriting a financial crisis from President Trump, audiences in 2000 might have chuckled, never imagining that less than 2 decades later those words would feel hauntingly real. And when the 2016 U.S. election rolled around, clips of that episode resurfaced everywhere. Fans and critics alike couldn't believe their eyes. A line that had been written as a gag had somehow become a mirror of reality. The episode itself wasn't about Trump. It was about Bart's lack of ambition and Lisa's rise to leadership. Yet that single reference overshadowed everything else in the story. It became the focal point of countless discussions, memes, and debates. The Simpsons had once again done what it seemed to do best: blur the line between fiction and reality in a way that felt almost supernatural. People began asking, how did the writers know? Was it luck, coincidence, or something more? The Simpsons showrunner at the time, Al Jean, later explained that the joke was meant to be a satirical warning, not a prediction. He said they wanted to imagine the most ridiculous, absurd scenario possible, and Trump as president was exactly that. But here's the catch. Satire works because it's grounded in reality, even when exaggerated. Trump had already toyed with the idea of running for office in the 1990s. His persona as a businessman made him a recognizable symbol of ambition and greed. In the minds of the writers, combining that persona with politics was the perfect punchline. In hindsight, though, that punchline reads like foreshadowing, as if they tapped into a future that no one else could see. When the episode resurfaced in 2016, it wasn't just a nostalgic callback. It felt eerie, unsettling, and oddly prophetic. It wasn't just that they named Trump. It was that they placed him in the exact role he would later assume, and they did it 16 years before it happened. Millions of viewers around the world shared the clip, adding fuel to the reputation of The Simpsons as the show that could predict the future. Headlines in newspapers and magazines amplified it, framing the episode as one of the most shocking examples of their foresight. And what makes this moment stand out even more is the casualness of it all. Lisa doesn't deliver the line as a dramatic prophecy. She says it matter-of-factly, as though Trump's presidency was simply another chapter in history. That nonchalant delivery only deepened the impact when the real Trump campaign unfolded, because it felt like the show had spoken about it as an inevitability rather than a farce. It was this combination of satire, absurdity, and uncanny resemblance to reality that transformed Bart to the Future from just another Simpsons episode into a cultural artifact. As time went on, people didn't just see this as one more gag that came true. They saw it as a warning. A joke that should have stayed in fiction had spilled into reality. And that transformation, from comedy to history, is why this particular episode continues to shock audiences worldwide, standing as one of the most famous and talked about moments in the legacy of The Simpsons. When Donald Trump first announced his candidacy for President of the United States in June 2015, the world reacted with a mixture of laughter, disbelief, and skepticism. Standing at Trump Tower with the now famous escalator entrance, Trump delivered a speech that shocked the political establishment. Here was a billionaire businessman, a reality television star, and a tabloid icon stepping into the most serious arena of them all, American politics. For many, it felt like performance art, another publicity stunt in the long career of a man who thrived on headlines. The idea that he could actually win seemed impossible. Yet, as the months unfolded, the impossible began to take shape, and what had once been a Simpsons punchline suddenly became America's reality. Trump's campaign was unlike anything the modern political world had ever seen. He didn't speak like a traditional politician. He didn't use carefully polished speeches or calculated diplomatic language. Instead, he spoke in a blunt, sometimes shocking, and always attention-grabbing manner. He called out opponents by name, challenged the media directly, and leaned into his celebrity status. His rallies became spectacles, filled with energy, controversy, and massive crowds. He branded himself not as a politician, but as an outsider who was going to shake up a broken system. That outsider narrative struck a chord with millions of Americans who felt disillusioned, unheard, and frustrated with politics as usual. This is where the eerie connection to The Simpsons' gag about a President Trump comes into sharper focus. In the year 2000, the writers chose Trump because his name was synonymous with extravagance and audacity, a symbol of a world turned upside down. Fast forward to 2016, and those very traits, the boldness, the brashness, the unpredictability, became the core of his campaign. What was once satire had now transformed into a campaign strategy. Trump's candidacy felt surreal, as though the nation had stepped into an alternate reality that The Simpsons had sketched years before. As Trump moved through the Republican primaries, the disbelief of the political class only deepened. Commentators, analysts, and career politicians dismissed him at first, predicting his campaign would fizzle out quickly. But each outrageous statement, each bold promise, each moment that seemed like it should end his chances only seemed to fuel his momentum. He defied political gravity. States that were expected to go to seasoned politicians turned in his favor. The billionaire businessman with no political experience was outmaneuvering lifelong insiders. For supporters, he represented authenticity, someone who said what others were afraid to say. For critics, he represented chaos, a dangerous gamble with the future of the country. But no matter which side people were on, no one could ignore him. By the time Trump secured the Republican nomination, The Simpsons' prediction was already going viral. Clips of Lisa Simpson talking about inheriting quite a budget crunch from President Trump spread like wildfire across social media. Headlines resurfaced the story again and again. Memes flooded the internet. People marveled at the bizarre overlap of cartoon satire and political reality. The campaign trail itself began to feel like an extension of that cartoonish exaggeration. Only this time, it wasn't Springfield. It was Washington, D.C. The general election against Hillary Clinton amplified this surreal atmosphere even more. Traditional debates turned into spectacles. Media coverage became wall-to-wall. Every word Trump said dissected and magnified. His slogans, like "Make America Great Again," became rallying cries across the country. His Twitter feed, once seen as a celebrity quirk, became a direct communication tool to millions of supporters. The establishment laughed at first, just as audiences laughed back in 2000 when The Simpsons casually mentioned a Trump presidency. But as election night drew closer, the laughter gave way to nervousness, then shock, and finally, history. On November 8, 2016, Donald Trump was elected as the 45th President of the United States. The world woke up to a reality that many thought impossible. And in the background of this monumental event, The Simpsons clip from Bart to the Future echoed louder than ever. What was once a satirical gag now felt like a prophecy fulfilled. Commentators across the globe referenced it in disbelief. Could a cartoon really have predicted this? Or had The Simpsons, through sharp satire and cultural observation, simply tapped into the undercurrents of American society long before anyone else noticed? Trump's 2016 campaign embodied everything that The Simpsons joke had symbolized: the blending of entertainment and politics, the rise of celebrity culture into governance, and the unpredictable twists of history that leave people questioning how reality could become so strange. What started as laughter turned into debates, arguments, and a new chapter in American history that continues to divide, inspire, and shock people to this day. The joke had crossed over into reality, and once again, The Simpsons' uncanny ability to mirror the world left audiences stunned and unsettled. When Donald Trump officially won the presidency in 2016, the world was already reeling from one of the most unexpected election outcomes in modern history. But alongside the political debates, the policy discussions, and the shockwaves running through Washington, there was another story capturing the imagination of millions. The Simpsons had called it years before. Almost overnight, the clip from the year 2000 episode Bart to the Future went viral. Screenshots of Lisa Simpson in the Oval Office, calmly mentioning the chaos inherited from President Trump, flooded timelines, news articles, and television broadcasts. People weren't just stunned by the election, they were stunned by the idea that a cartoon had seemed to foresee it all 16 years earlier. The reaction was more than just amusement. For some, it was eerie. It felt like a scene from a science fiction movie, where fiction bleeds into reality and leaves people questioning what's real and what's not. Viewers who had grown up watching The Simpsons suddenly looked back on the show with a different kind of respect, or perhaps even suspicion. It wasn't just entertainment anymore. It felt like an oracle, a cultural time capsule that had cracked open a future nobody thought possible. The Simpsons had always poked fun at politics, but this was different. This was uncanny. Social media became the center of this reaction. Within hours of the election results, hashtags like "Ironier Simpsons prediction" and "Atita President Trump" started trending worldwide. Memes circulated everywhere, showing side-by-side comparisons of Trump's campaign imagery and scenes from the cartoon. Some even pointed to another detail from a 2015 Simpsons short that eerily mirrored Trump's escalator entrance at Trump Tower, down to a supporter dropping a sign in the background. To millions of people scrolling through their phones that night, the idea that The Simpsons had predicted reality wasn't just a funny coincidence, it was a cultural phenomenon. The press amplified it even further. Major outlets like CNN, BBC, and The Guardian ran stories about the prediction, analyzing the strange overlap between satire and reality. Pundits debated whether this was proof of the writer's foresight or simply an extraordinary coincidence born from sharp social commentary. Late-night comedians, always eager to comment on both Trump and The Simpsons, added fuel to the fire by joking that maybe we should start watching old episodes more carefully if we want to know what's coming next. But not all reactions were light-hearted. For many, the prediction carried a deeper, almost unsettling message. If a cartoon had once joked about something so outlandish, and then that outlandish scenario came true, what else could come true? It raised questions about the direction of society, about how entertainment and politics were becoming increasingly intertwined. To some, The Simpsons' Trump connection symbolized the absurdity of modern life, that we had entered an era where satire no longer exaggerated reality but simply described it. For Trump supporters, the prediction became a point of pride, almost as if the presidency had been destined. They shared the clip as proof that even pop culture had seen his rise coming, long before the mainstream media or the political establishment took him seriously. It added to the mythology of Trump's outsider status, the idea that he was rewriting the rules and shocking the world in ways no one thought possible. For critics, the prediction was used as a warning, a sign that the absurd had become normal, that democracy had taken such a wild turn that even a joke could manifest as truth. In this way, The Simpsons episode became a cultural Rorschach test. People interpreted it based on their own beliefs, fears, and hopes about the world Trump's presidency represented. Academics and media analysts even weighed in. Some argued that The Simpsons hadn't predicted anything at all, that the writers had simply chosen Trump as the most outrageous example of American excess at the time. In their eyes, the prediction wasn't supernatural. It was satire rooted in the truth that celebrity culture, money, and politics were inevitably colliding. Others, however, couldn't shake the chill of how precise the show seemed to be. It wasn't just Trump's name, it was the timing, the context, the way the joke landed as if it had been pulled directly from the future. Even years later, the public reaction to this prediction hasn't faded. Anytime a major political or cultural event unfolds, people go back to The Simpsons to ask if it had already been drawn in Springfield. The Trump prediction became the crown jewel in the show's legacy of foresight, the example that solidified its reputation not just as a comedy, but as a cultural prophet of sorts. That single line from Lisa Simpson became etched into the collective memory, forever linked with the surreal reality of 2016. When people look back at The Simpsons' reference to President Trump, it's easy to laugh it off as a strange coincidence, a cartoon joke that just happened to come true. But if you pause for a moment and peel back the layers, the joke was more than just humor. It was symbolism. It reflected deeper truths about American culture, about politics, about the blending of celebrity and power, and about how satire sometimes becomes a mirror so clear that it looks prophetic. To really understand why the Trump prediction struck the world so deeply, we need to step into the symbolic meaning hidden in that single line of dialogue. Donald Trump, at the time of the episode in 2000, was more than just a businessman. He was an icon of excess, a walking brand, someone whose name was plastered on skyscrapers and casinos, whose lifestyle was the stuff of headlines and gossip columns. He wasn't just a person, he was a symbol of money, power, and ambition without boundaries. So when The Simpsons inserted him into the storyline as a past president, they weren't just choosing a random celebrity. They were holding up a mirror to the idea that in America, wealth and fame could someday outweigh experience and qualification when it came to leadership. The absurdity of the joke came from the truth it was exaggerating, that celebrity culture was steadily growing into a force that could shape politics itself. Symbolically, Trump's presidency in The Simpsons was a warning, not a forecast. It symbolized what happens when spectacle becomes more important than substance, when entertainment and politics fuse so tightly that the line between them vanishes. In the year 2000, that was satire. By 2016, it had become reality, and this is where the symbolism of that prediction becomes haunting. It wasn't just about Trump. It was about a society that rewards fame, personality, and branding more than it rewards policy, nuance, or governance. Look closely at Lisa Simpson's role in the episode. She is depicted as the president who comes after Trump, tasked with repairing the damage left behind. On one level, this was a gag, a chance to show Lisa as a responsible leader cleaning up a mess. But, symbolically, it hinted at the generational consequences of choosing leaders based on charisma rather than capability. Lisa represented stability, intelligence, and rationality. Trump represented chaos, extravagance, and unpredictability. The contrast wasn't subtle, and it wasn't just for laughs. It was a symbolic statement about the dangers of mixing politics with celebrity culture. For the audience, the symbolism became more striking as Trump's real campaign gained traction. Suddenly, the absurd wasn't absurd anymore. It was happening in real life. The Simpsons had distilled into one sentence what so many people would later feel during the 2016 election, the sense that America had entered a new era, where politics itself was turning into entertainment, where the spectacle of a rally could outweigh the fine print of a policy, and where a personality could carry more weight than a political resume. There's also a deeper cultural symbolism at play. The Trump prediction became a metaphor for the unpredictability of the future. It symbolized how quickly norms can change, how what seems impossible today can become tomorrow's headline. The Simpsons had always thrived on exaggerating reality, but in this case, reality caught up with exaggeration, and that created a symbolic lesson. Never underestimate the strange directions history can take. For supporters of Trump, the symbolism was almost mythic. They saw it as destiny, as if even pop culture had recognized his potential years before anyone else. The clip became part of a narrative that Trump was breaking the mold, rewriting history, and proving the skeptics wrong. For critics, the symbolism was darker. It was a warning that society had ignored, a reminder that the blending of fame and politics could lead to consequences that were both unpredictable and unsettling. The fact that this prediction came from The Simpsons added another layer of meaning. This wasn't a political think tank, a research paper, or a pollster forecasting the future. It was a cartoon, a comedy designed to entertain. That contrast itself became symbolic. It suggested that sometimes humor, satire, and cultural commentary can cut deeper into truth than the most serious analysis. It showed how art can capture the undercurrents of society in ways that statistics never can. And maybe that's the real symbolism here, that The Simpsons didn't just predict Trump. It symbolized the shift of an era, where entertainment and politics fused into one, where the spectacle became the reality, and where satire became prophecy. That's why the moment continues to resonate. It's not just about a cartoon joke coming true. It's about what that joke represented, about the cultural forces it revealed, and about the way society, often without realizing it, walked straight into the future that satire had warned about years before. The Simpsons has become legendary for its uncanny ability to line up with real-world events, and the Trump presidency is just one of the crown jewels in its legacy of predictions. But when people see clips of the show come true, whether it's smartwatches, video calls, malfunctioning voting machines, or Trump in the White House, one question always lingers in the air. Can a cartoon really predict the future, or is something else going on? This question isn't just about entertainment. It touches something much deeper in the human psyche. It forces us to wonder whether the line between comedy and prophecy is thinner than we think. On the surface, the rational answer is simple. The Simpsons doesn't predict the future. It reflects the present. The writers are not mystics gazing into crystal balls. They are observers of culture, politics, and human behavior. They take what they see in society and push it to the extreme, exaggerating reality until it becomes absurd. That's what makes the show funny. But here's the twist. When reality itself grows stranger and more exaggerated, those once absurd jokes suddenly don't feel like jokes anymore. They feel like predictions. Think about it this way. The show operates on satire. It takes real trends, technological innovation, celebrity culture, political corruption, human vanity, and spins them into comedic storylines. But trends have a direction, and if you can spot where things are heading, you can imagine the next step. When the writers in 2000 picked Donald Trump as a joke president, they were highlighting the growing influence of celebrity culture in politics. Years later, that trend had matured into reality. The satire wasn't mystical, it was observational. Yet the precision with which it aligned with real history makes it feel almost supernatural. Still, people love to believe in mysteries. When fans see side-by-side comparisons of Simpsons episodes and real-world events, the coincidences feel too sharp, too eerie. The episode showing Disney buying 20th Century Fox years before it happened. The image of Homer holding up a smartphone-like device before such technology existed. The vision of the United States winning gold in curling against Sweden, which later came true. The sheer number of these moments makes skeptics pause. Is it just luck? Is it probability? Or is there something more mysterious about the way satire seems to capture reality before it arrives? Part of the allure lies in how the human brain works. We are wired to see patterns. When something uncanny happens, we don't dismiss it. We latch onto it, share it, amplify it. Out of hundreds of outrageous Simpsons jokes that never came true, we focus on the handful that did. That selective memory gives the impression of prophecy. It feels magical, even though it might just be coincidence. And yet, the more coincidences pile up, the harder it becomes to wave them all away. There's also another layer to consider. The Simpsons has been running for over 30 years. With hundreds of episodes and thousands of jokes, it has covered just about every topic imaginable. Politics, science, culture, sports, technology. By sheer volume alone, some of those ideas were bound to brush against reality. But what makes the Trump prediction stand out is not just that it happened, but how specific it was. It wasn't vague, like predicting a famous person will do something important. It was direct. President Trump, followed by a financial crisis. That level of specificity is what makes people question whether it was more than coincidence. And here's where the mystery deepens. What if The Simpsons is not predicting the future, but shaping it? Pop culture has a powerful influence on society. Sometimes the images we laugh at today plant seeds in the imagination, subtly shaping the possibilities people consider tomorrow. Could it be that the very act of joking about President Trump in 2000 made the idea stick in the cultural consciousness, making it slightly more believable when he ran years later? That theory makes the whole phenomenon even more fascinating. Maybe The Simpsons isn't just a mirror of the future. It is part of how the future is created. The broader mystery, then, isn't just about The Simpsons. It's about us. It's about the strange feedback loop between fiction and reality, between satire and history. We laugh at the absurdity. We share it. We remember it. And when life begins to imitate it, we are shocked, even though we were part of the process all along. The Trump prediction is not just a story about a cartoon that came true. It's a story about how society often underestimates the power of ideas, even the ones delivered in the form of comedy. So, can cartoons predict the future? Rationally, no. They can only exaggerate the present. But sometimes exaggeration is just a step ahead of reality. Sometimes the sharpest observers of culture can see where the cracks are forming, where the trends are pointing, where the future is already whispering its arrival. And when those observations are packaged in humor, they don't feel heavy or prophetic. They feel like jokes. Until the day comes when the joke walks right out of the TV screen and into the headlines. The story of The Simpsons predicting Donald Trump's presidency is more than just a curious piece of trivia. It is a reminder of how thin the line can be between satire and reality, between exaggeration and truth. When Lisa Simpson casually mentioned inheriting quite a budget crunch from President Trump back in 2000, it was written as a gag, a sharp jab at the absurdity of mixing celebrity culture with politics. And yet, 16 years later, that gag became one of the most shocking and unforgettable echoes of pop culture aligning with history. But what truly makes this story fascinating is not just that it happened, it's what it represents. The Simpsons has always been a mirror of society, stretching reality into comedy, and in doing so, often landing closer to the future than anyone could imagine. From technology to politics, from entertainment to world events, the show has consistently revealed the undercurrents of human behavior. Sometimes those undercurrents rise up and break the surface, leaving us stunned at how a cartoon seemed to capture them long before they became real. Trump's presidency, in this context, is more than a prediction fulfilled. It symbolizes the way culture evolves, the way entertainment and politics bleed into one another, and the way ideas, whether serious or satirical, can shape our collective imagination. It shows us how satire can warn us, how jokes can plant seeds, and how history often takes the paths we least expect. So, when we look back on that single Simpsons line, we're not just looking at a cartoon joke that came true. We're re-looking at a cultural moment that revealed something much larger. That in a world where the absurd often becomes reality, perhaps the best way to glimpse the future is not through prophecy, but through the laughter that tells us truths we're not yet ready to face.